Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Not technically together, but Tom, how are you doing today?
We are appropriately distant, which is really all you can ask at this point.
Yep, socially awkwardly distant.
Mm-hmm. Even more than normal.
Yes. So, Tom, everything going all right for you?
Yeah. It's spending a lot of time with my kids, which is great, and a lot of time around the house, which is good. I'm glad I like my family. I'm glad I like where I live. That's all good. How are you doing? More importantly, how are you doing?
Doing all right. I was wondering if you've gotten the Common Core math stuff out of your kids yet. Have you taught them actual math?
It has been. We had 1 week of school and trying to homeschool kids. And then we had, because this was supposed to be their spring vacation week, they said, okay, well, we're not going to send any assignments to it. Like, but I was just getting good at this, and now I'm taking a week, and now I'm going to have to get them back into school a week from now. This is all wrong.
Yeah, nice time for a spring break. But the good news is that there is news around the Ohio State world for those of us who do this. And I guess, Tom, let's start with some basketball because there's quite a bit going on right now. Soon after we recorded last week, DJ Carton announced that he would be entering the transfer portal. Freshman point guard has been gone for a while due to mental health reasons. And then he came back to Ohio State, came back to the university, and was here for, I don't know, maybe a week or so before everybody got sent home. And once that happens and you're just kicking everybody out and there's no way to like glom onto each other and rekindle that, I guess it wasn't a huge surprise that he decided to transfer. And I think about a day or two before he announced his transfer, there were reports that Ohio State was looking at graduate transfer point guards, which was probably the first big hint that Carton wouldn't be coming back. So, Tom, next year they go into it with C.J. Walker and Dwayne Washington unless they can land another graduate transfer point guard. It's transfer point guard university at Ohio State.
Yeah, it's a little thin at the one spot and really even at the two spot because, if you're counting Dwayne Washington as a potential point guard, then that leaves Luther Muhammad and the freshman Eugene Brown as a real true shooting guard, I guess, which, that's a little thinner than you'd like in the backcourt, I would say.
And then the other news, the better news is Harvard graduate transfer Seth Towns announced that he would be a Buckeye. So he is coming in. Could have 2 years of eligibility. I know everybody keeps saying that he does, but I think he still has to apply for that 6th year because he played 2 years, missed 2 years with a knee injury that didn't heal after surgery. So this will be his 5th year coming up, and then he would have to, generally, the guys have to apply in that 5th year to get that 6th year. But I think most people assume he'll get it. The interesting thing with him, and he comes in having averaged 16 points and 5.7 rebounds as a sophomore at Harvard, was the Ivy League Player of the Year. He's a 6'7" guy, and Ohio State is going to have basically an entire roster of guys who are 6'6", 6'7", who will have to float in, between the 3, the 4, and the 5, especially if Caleb Wesson leaves. And that gets a little bit thinner now because it sounds like Alonzo Gaffney, he is reportedly on his way out, not to transfer, but to test the professional basketball waters, according to Brian Snow at 24/7. And there's a lot of transition going on. But once this all settles, you're going to have Justice Suing, 6'6", swing guy who will probably have to play up at the 4 at times. E.J. Liddell, 6'6", who's going to be a 4. Kyle Young, I guess he's going to be the center. You've also got Zed Key, the incoming freshman, who was like a 6'6", 6'7" power forward guy. They've got so many of these same body types, but really no height outside of Ibrahima Diallo. And I don't know how ready he'll be next year. Like, I like all of these guys, but it's going to be a small team, Tom.
Well, it's going to be a small team, except they have so many guys who are forwards that they could run out like a point guard and 4 forwards if they wanted to, and be like this incredible, bizarre matchup team for other teams where anyone with a big center is probably going to maul them next year. But if you run out Seth Towns and EJ Liddell and Kyle Young and Justice Suing at the same time, then you've got 4 guys on the floor who are 6'6" or taller, and Seth Towns is a good enough shooter that I wonder if you could play him almost as your 2. And he was over a 40%. He was a 42% shooter from 3 in his sophomore season, which, just for comparison's sake, the only guy, if we're assuming Caleb Wesson leaves, and Andre Wesson is obviously gone, DJ Carton is obviously gone, that means that the only guy on the Ohio State roster who's over 40% last year from 3 was Justin Ahrens. Dwayne Washington was a little short of 40%, and then everyone else was below 35. So, you could run out a big lineup with Towns as your 2, I guess, but
maybe Suing.
Maybe Suing, yeah, and just as Suing, for if you don't remember, he was a transfer from Cal who sat out this year. It's a weird roster, and very clearly, like, you can look at some teams and go, oh yeah, they were really strategic about how they added people. This is just kind of like, yeah, some guys left and now we have to add some new guys, and these are the guys who are around, so we're just going to make it work. And it's not necessarily how you draw it up, but it's a team that, if Towns is as good a shooter as he was a couple of years ago, and just watching some highlights, he looks like he might be able to create his own shot in a way that some other guys on this team can't, which would be a pretty big addition. That they could be a really weird, interesting matchup for some teams next year. But yeah, it is not your typical roster construction for sure for a Big Ten basketball team.
No, and we'll see what Musa Jallow looks like next year as another possible guy at the 2 or the 3. He missed this year, was a guy who could spend some time working on his shot, and I assume he did that. It's going to be an interesting team because there are some guys who are, quite talented. We saw EJ Liddell close well. Justice Suing is another guy, like 15-7 or so thereabouts last year for Cal as he set out, transferring this year. So if with Suing, Liddell, and Towns, I see them trying to figure out how to play those 3. I don't think you can play them all together all that often. Kyle Young, does he get 30 minutes at center? And then you've got those other 3 to spell him, a few minutes here, because I don't even know that Suing could do that. Liddell, maybe. Can you get 5 minutes, 7 minutes out of Diallo? Maybe. But if Caleb Wesson decided to come back, first of all, they would be 1 over the scholarship limit, but he would solve an awful lot of problems. But I think we all know he wanted this to be his last year. Ending as it did probably doesn't sit well, but Tom, we've seen so many times where an ending doesn't sit well, but after a couple of weeks, it's okay. they get over it pretty quickly. But he's, we're not talking about a top 15 draft pick here. We're talking about somebody that will be invited to camps, but will likely play overseas. And you wonder if he comes back, now the minutes get even lessened for everybody, but this would be a pretty talented team. Overall, it can hit you from a number of places, especially if CJ Walker continues his trajectory. I think ideally he was brought here to be a backup point guard, kind of like CJ Jackson was before him. They just can't ever get that starting point guard to take over. But Walker did a good job, just like Keyshawn Woods did at the end of the year before. And maybe if Wesson comes back, I think they're a threat to do a lot of damage. If he goes, it's going to be a heck of a coaching job by Holtman he's going to have to coach his butt off, moving pieces all over the place, and you can't just sit back and let it happen. But it'd be an interesting team if Caleb Wesson decides to come back.
Yeah, if I'm with you there, where I assume that Caleb Wesson is probably leaving, because I mean we've had this conversation before, but he's one of those guys who just is what he is. He's not ever going to be a lottery pick. Like, I don't think there's anything he can do to be a lottery pick. He got himself in great shape this year, put together a very, very solid year. I mean, obviously, like you said, it didn't end the way, you would have wanted it, but, shot 42% from three, 73% on free throws, averaged 14 points, 9 boards a game. I mean, he had a very solid year. That's kind of what he is. Like, I don't think you're magically going to get, 25 points and 15 boards out of him next year. I think you've kind of seen what he has to offer at this point. So I don't know what would be in it for him to come back unless, overseas leagues are just like not playing next year for COVID related reasons. But, if he did come back, that would answer kind of the biggest question on the team. But I don't expect him to do that. So that makes Ibrahima Diallo maybe the most, like, the biggest question mark on that team next year. Because if he can be something, even if it's just give you 5-8 minutes a game, that would answer a huge question for this team. Because right now you have no one bigger than 6'8" on the roster if Caleb Wesson goes. And it's like, well, good news, Kyle Young. You're the center now. Figure it out. Go defend guys who are, 4 to 6 inches taller than you. If you could get 5-8 minutes out of Diallo, that would be enormous. But he played a total, I looked it up, he played a total of 40 minutes this season, which is less than Danny Hummer, who was a walk-on. So, he was like very much the, he was right there with Harrison Hookfin and Danny Hummer in terms of minutes, which tells you, not only was he not ready to play this year, he probably wasn't close to being ready to play this year, because they didn't just, he played in 8 games total. So, he wasn't like, well, we'll go to him if Wesson gets in early foul trouble. It's just like, no, he's not ready yet at all. And I mean, there were people at the beginning of last year who were saying he was probably going to need 2 years of polishing before he was ready to, be any kind of a contributor. If they can get something out of him next year, that would be huge. But that may be that would be, I think, maybe a little ahead of the schedule that most people are projecting for him.
I think another part of why Alonzo Gaffney maybe left is because he saw himself as the tallest guy and figured he would have to play defensive center, and which he had to do some this season. And he's not really much of a defender, and he's more of an offensive guy. So I think maybe he kind of saw the writing on the wall of where he would be defensively and didn't want much of it. Although if you're going to be playing center, to do it in Ohio State's offense, as Caleb Wesson has shown, like you can play down low, you can be out wide, you can be the top 3-point shooter, you can be the top paint scorer. So there's plenty of options for a center in Ohio State's offense, but you got to be able to bang down low, and that's something that wasn't really in Gaffney's wheelhouse, as he was 6'9" and maybe $190, something like that. So
the thing that's interesting to me about next year's team, I mean, we talked about this like weird fit of different guys in different positions, but Chris Holtman has that saying about get old and stay old, and just like having a veteran team and not being just a whole bunch of freshmen. Next year's team, you've got seniors, CJ Walker, Kyle Young, Caleb Wesson if he's back, juniors, Luther Muhammad, Dwayne Washington, Justin Ahrens, Musa Jallow, Justice Suing, Seth Towns. And your sophomores are E.J. Liddell, who looks like he might be ready to kind of take that next step, and then Ibrahima Diallo, who is, just kind of a big question mark right now. And then a pair of freshmen who, it's Eugene Brown and Zed Key are the two guys coming in. Brown's a shooting guard, Key is a power forward. Neither of them are, Brown was the 113th overall recruit in this 2020 class. Key was the 154th overall recruit. Those are guys in guys who are in that tier are typically not guys who come in and you're like expecting an immediate, impact from them. Those are guys who are, they're here for a couple of years, and then they start maybe getting into the starting rotation as sophomores or juniors. So really, at that point, you're playing maybe E.J. Liddell as a sophomore, and everyone else who's seeing the court and kind of regular minutes as a junior or senior. So, if you have the veteran team that is playing smart, good fundamental basketball, that's the kind of team that even if they're not the most talented team in the Big Ten, they might be able to win a whole bunch of games just by, I don't want to say playing the game the right way, because that sounds like they're, making set shots and, bounce passes and stuff. But I feel like that's the kind of team that Chris Holtmann might be able to squeeze more out of than you would think.
Mm-hmm. And we'll see just how good he is next year, because it is an odd team. It's an odd makeup, and this will be his time to shine and earn his $3 million per year. Finally, it's about time you start making good on that contract. Tom, it wasn't just a basketball team that was adding players over this past week, because on who knows what is today. On Sunday, Trey Sermon, running back from Oklahoma, announced, or was it Saturday, when he announced he was transferring to Ohio State, graduate transfer. He played 3 years at Oklahoma, rushed for a little over 2,000 yards in those 3 seasons, and missed the end of this past season with a knee injury. Played 10 games. But Tom, I was looking at his game by game stats. And even when he was healthy, he didn't touch the ball once against Texas, and that was game 6.
Yeah, he was a huge part of their offense when he was a sophomore, and then just kind of like fell off the radar last year. And that was very odd to me. He averaged 7.1 yards per carry. It wasn't like he had a bad season last year. So yeah, that was
my theory. Is he just didn't fit right with Jalen Hurts, who carried the ball 230 times last year. And I wrote about it on Monday, where under Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, he was consistent throughout the season. His sophomore rushed for 900 and some yards, with Kyler Murray running the ball about 140 times. And for running backs, it's difficult to get into a groove when I saw a couple of Oklahoma fans, they referred to Jalen Hurts as a ball hog. So that's not always a great environment for a running back to thrive. When you go back to the 2018 and 2017 season, when Oklahoma was a better passing team, that's when Trey Sermon was at his best, rushing for 700 and some yards as a true freshman. And then, like I said, over 900 and some yards as a sophomore. And then last year, 385 yards in 10 games, doesn't touch the ball in the 6th game, and the 3 games after that touches it, I think, like 9 times for 40 yards on the ground. And it was at that point, it was as if Lincoln Riley before that Texas game, that week leading up to Texas, they're like, you know what, we're just going to go with these other guys, and they've got good guys, but for whatever reason, and I saw other, the best way to get information on a team is to go to the message boards, Tom. I don't know if you know that.
That's where I get all my information, not just about teams.
Yes, exactly. But there were some fans who were saying that Trey Sermon is frustrating, because at times he can look like the best back in the nation, and other times he can be very hesitant. I don't know how hesitant he was in his first 2 seasons, but I can see him being hesitant last year, when that mesh point, you almost always expect the ball to be taken away from you.
Well, and yeah, that's a valid point. I'll just read you his average per rush for the first 5 games of the season before that Texas game. Houston, 8.3. South Dakota, 6.2. UCLA, 7.3. Texas Tech, 10.9. Kansas, 6.5. And that was on basically between 7 and 11 carries a game. Mm-hmm. If Ohio State got that out of him this year, I don't think they would stop giving him the ball. I think they would probably keep feeding him the ball a decent amount. And he's not – the most carries he's ever had was 26 against Texas Tech in his sophomore year. It was 26 carries, 206 yards, 3 touchdowns. And, Texas Tech, the next time Texas Tech plays defense will be the first time. But, he had a good game against Texas Christian in 2018. That was a TCU team that Ohio State played. And, that was not a great TCU team, but they're fine, and they generally have a pretty good defense. 17 carries, 110 yards, 6.5 per, a couple of touchdowns. Like, he seems like someone who very well could be, if you give him 15 carries a game, he's probably going to get you 1,000 yards over the course of the season. I mean, that seems like that's a pretty safe bet, I would say.
There's going to be quite a battle in the fall, and we'll probably talk about that. But yeah, he's definitely capable, and the average per carry, it definitely stands out. I've had people ask me, who does he, is he like J.K. Dobbins? And no, I mean, he's more of a slasher. I think he reminds me more of Marcus Crowley if you're asking for somebody on this current team. But he also has plenty of juke, provided his knee injury is good to go. And interestingly, he and Marcus Crowley injured their knees on the exact same day. So we'll see how they compare once they get to camp. But it was, like I said, they were both in November, so they should be good to go. Even an ACL should be fine. I saw somebody say that Sermon said it was an LCL, which would be a lateral collateral ligament. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. Even though, Tom, back in college, I did sprain my LCL. So I do know a little bit about it. It hurts. You can still walk on it. I didn't need surgery. I just got a knee brace, a sleeve. So based on that, I think Trey Sermon will be good to go.
I think we need story time. How did you hurt your LCL?
Oh, it's not important. But if you must know.
I must, yes.
We were, me and a neighbor, wasn't even a friend, just a neighbor who liked to throw Frisbee. We went through...
as all good stories start. Yes, go on.
We were just throwing Frisbee out in, I think it was the parking lot. Do you know Suzy Q? The pool hall on 4th or Summit, whichever one is further away from campus.
Yes.
So we were in that whole parking lot, I think, throwing a Frisbee, and I went to stomp on the Frisbee because it was a bad throw. It was low. And because we were on blacktop, my leg just kept going and my knee gave out. But being a true warrior and battler, I kept throwing the Frisbee after that. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized that I had been injured. And so I went to the OSU medical place because every student then was where I had student insurance. So I'm like, hey, I got a knee thing. And he felt on my knee and he's like, yeah, that's your LCL. And I'm like, I didn't even know there were any other CLs than A. But he's like, yeah, there's an LCL, there's a PCL. It's, it's crazy. So yeah, I went and got me a sleeve. And then sometimes it would be fine. Other times, like stepping up onto a bus, you look like an idiot when you try to step onto a bus and your leg gives out in front of a bus driver who you are trying to impress.
Mm-hmm. As I remember the Ohio State University cabs bus drivers, definitely a group you're always trying to get look good in front of. So I guess if we're going to give Trey Sermon a comp to anyone who is a former athlete at Ohio State, I think Tony Gerdeman then is maybe the best one. Then
you're right. I said Marcus Crowley. I should have said me. So yeah, I like the assessment of 1,000 yards that you said.
Crowley is an interesting comp because that's the kind of back where if you assume that Master Teague is back for this season and reasonably healthy, which is a little bit of a leap right now, because we don't know. But if you assume he's back for the season, he is kind of that pounding back. And so then a Crowley or Sermon type might be a good complement to him, where you've got, there are certain teams where a Master Teague type back is going to be your best option. But if you have the kind of, thunder and lightning combination, someone with a little more change of direction, that's pretty intriguing. And, if you have Sermon and you have Crowley who kind of fit that mold, that gives you kind of a couple rolls of the dice there, where if one of them is a little slower to get back from their injury or isn't 100% for the fall, you've got a couple guys who give you the opportunity to be, fill that role on the offense. I think Sermon is probably, to me, the starting running back this fall. My sense is that he's, going to be healthy for fall camp, be healthy, by summer. And that he probably did not come here to sit on the bench. And the fact that they brought him in, they recognize that that's a spot where they need one more guy to be a contributor. So I think right now I would say, if you're asking me who's the starting running back for game number 1, I think there's a pretty good chance it's Trey Sermon.
I'm not ready to go there yet, but as you said, the simple fact that they went out and brought him in, I think that speaks volumes. That says a lot without saying anything. And we will get to talk to Ryan Day via teleconference on Wednesday. I don't know if he can even speak of Trey Sermon, Tom, because he's not enrolled at Ohio State. He is still, I believe, probably, although being a graduate student, he may not be doing much of anything at Oklahoma other than one class. But you can't really talk about players at other universities, so I don't even know if he's going to be able to talk about it. But I'm not ready to go with Sermon yet, although the injuries to Master Teague are the big thing. The experience is huge as well. So does it come down to Sermon and Marcus Crowley? Perhaps, in terms of getting ready for that first game. I think he's the betting favorite, Sermon. But I go back to how many guys have come to Ohio State, have transferred over as veterans and really succeeded. And there's not a lot, but not a lot of guys do it. Kendall Sheffield wasn't, I don't think he would count. Justin Fields was had one freshman season. I go back to
Jonah Jackson.
There you go. That's a good one. Thank you. I was going back to the center from Alabama who transferred over and was supposed to start and never did anything. But yeah, okay, Jonah Jackson. He has started it.
Chad Lindsey or Lindsley? That's who you're thinking
Lindsey.
of from Alabama.
Lindsey.
Yeah, Lindsey. Yeah.
Yeah, and he didn't do anything. Of course, he got injured as well. So, the Jonah Jackson is a good one. So I'm going to delete this entire conversation.
I mean, it's been a long time since Ohio State's had someone transfer in.
And and the dumb thing is, we both were really high on Jonah Jackson and figured he would be really, really good. So for me to already have forgotten about him, that's my fault. But also, he plays guard. Come on, cut me some slack.
Number 1, he plays guard, and number 2, the Fiesta Bowl was 17 years ago at this point. It feels like so. Yeah, it's understandable. I'll let this one slide.
Thank you. So Sermon, I guess he is the betting favorite to get the starting job. The future of the Ohio State running back room also looks pretty good. Sermon won't be there in 2021, but you would expect Master Teague, Marcus Crowley, Steele Chambers, Mayan Williams, and then Evan Pryor, who is the number 6 running back in the 2021 class, committed. It was only a week ago, but it may feel longer than that. And then they're also in really good shape with Travion Henderson, who we talked a little bit about last week. He's the number 2 running back in the 24/7 composite, number 17 player overall, 5-star guy, averaged 12 yards per carry last year, out of Virginia, Gatorade Player of the Year. Would basically, for me, and maybe for Tony Alford and Ryan Day, make up for the Bijan Robinson fiasco, and would give Ohio State a 5-star running back for the first time since, again, I believe, Beanie Wells, if you're not counting Jalen Gill.
Yeah, I mean, if they can bring in 2 running backs the caliber of Henderson and Pryor in the same class, like that solves a whole lot of problems. That eliminates any kind of depth concerns you would have at that spot for a couple of years until someone transfers or someone gets hurt or something. But yeah, I mean, Henderson, you watch Henderson's highlights, and I've seen a bunch of people have this reaction, but it's like you watch him and he's so much better than everyone else on the field. It's like, okay, how good is the competition he's playing? Like, is this like you see a guy from, whatever, Vermont or something in his highlights, and it's just, it looks like he's playing against third graders. Mm-hmm. He jumps off the screen at you. Just speed, shiftiness, and just he's got a gear that no one else on that field has. And that's probably not going to translate exactly to the Big Ten level, but he's someone who sure looks like he could come in and be an immediate impact player for them. And a year from now, if you've got a senior Master Teague and junior Marcus Crowley and junior Steel Chambers, you have a guy like him, you have a guy like Pryor come in. They don't have to be the J.K. Dobbins immediate game one starter, but if you can kind of get them some reps, work them in, then by the time they're a sophomore, they're ready to be a major contributor. And it sure is amazing how Tony Alford went from one of the worst recruiters in the history of college football to, hey, he might land two of the top 6 running backs in the country. Like, wow, he figured out how to recruit again. Good for him.
Must have read a book or something.
Must have read some message boards is what I
yeah. There you go. I was going to suggest recruiting for dummies, but no, you're right. The message boards. The Henderson, for me, I mean, he is elite. You go watch his highlights and he's impressive. Dare I say Reggie Bush-like, or maybe for a more familiar comp, Jamal Berry-like.
I mean, I think people know who Reggie Bush is, probably.
Okay.
Unless they're checking the official record books, in which case they don't have any idea who he is because he's not in there anymore.
But they don't really have anybody currently like Henderson or Pryor, these 5'11", 195 guys with some power but are speedy and quick. Who can make guys miss. They're more jukey, more J.K. Dobbins, but not even necessarily like they're in that mode. Whereas the other guys are slashing, got power. We'll see what Mayan Williams is. I don't know if you guys saw his a photo he tweeted in the last couple of weeks of all of the weight he dropped. Basically went from looking like his dad to himself, as I would assume his dad looked, but just much slimmer. And I know there was some concerns about his speed. I'm guessing he's faster than he used to be just based on dropping the weight. So the future of the running back situation at Ohio State is the trajectory is going to a place where you wouldn't think they need to bring in a grad transfer anytime soon.
No, I mean, you're going to have pretty good depth there. And that's really, this is much like the offensive line position that, the spot they were in like a year ago where it was like, ooh, they're like dangerously thin there right now. But you bring in a grad transfer in Jonah Jackson, you bring in some, a big recruiting class for the offensive line. That was 6 guys in 2020. You're doing the same thing at the running back position, and the numbers are obviously a little smaller because it's a smaller room, but right now you look at it and they're like dangerously thin. It's like they've got DeMario McCall and they've got Steel Chambers, and that's the end of the list as far as healthy scholarship running backs go right now. But, now you've added Trey Sermon. You've got Marcus Crowley probably coming back. You've got you've got Master Teague probably coming back. All of a sudden it's like, okay, now they've got a reasonable numbers for this fall. You add in another couple guys after this fall in Trevion Henderson, assuming he ends up committing, Evan Pryor, and all of a sudden you've got, you haven't heard any discussion about the offensive line depth issues anymore because there are no offensive line depth issues anymore. It's the same thing with the running back room. Like, okay, you add these 2 guys and then it's fine. And it's not really a concern anymore. And it is kind of interesting to me that right now, good news for Michigan in recruiting is Well, if Trevion Henderson commits to Ohio State, then they probably don't have room for Donovan Edwards. So then, therefore, Donovan Edwards has to go somewhere else, and then Michigan maybe does end up with a 5-star prospect just almost by default.
You watch all of these gold mining shows on television, and I don't, but I had one on the other day because I think we're all desperate for television right now. And one of the guys was going through other people's tailings, which is stuff that they've already mined, but sometimes there's still gold in there. So it's. Are you saying, Tom, that Michigan is recruiting through Ohio State's tailings? They're just sifting through looking for stuff?
Well, there's no guarantee that they get him, but if Donovan Edwards is still on the market because Ohio State doesn't have a spot for him, and Ohio State was kind of considered the favorite for his services for a while, and I don't think they're going to be able to take 3 running backs in a class, and I can't imagine running backs would be all that thrilled to be one of 3 in a class. So that means he's probably ending up somewhere else. That doesn't mean he ends up at Michigan, but it at least means for Michigan, it means he doesn't end up at Ohio State.
Well, and speaking of Michigan, because we didn't get to do this last week, I don't even think they need Donovan Edwards because, as we know, Tom, offensive coordinator Josh Gattis, and I'm guessing the rest of the coaches at Michigan are working on the blueprint, and not even working on it. The blueprint is out on how to beat Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And this was something that Gattis tweeted out. It's looks like he's at home watching last year's game, perhaps.
Yes, he is.
It's a clip of Michigan scoring a touchdown on an end around, which if the blueprint, Tom, is just trick plays and misdirection, I don't know if that's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, I assume he meant that the blueprint is if we score a touchdown on every snap, we have a pretty good chance of winning the game, which, I mean, yes, that would be true. That's true. But I'll read his exact tweet. Corona may limit us to work from home, but don't think we're sleeping. 2019 is over, but the lessons learned live on. 2020, we won't be so kind to beat ourselves. The blueprint is out. We have only one thing on our mind. Hashtag a real one. I'm not sure that Michigan beat themselves last year when they lost by 29 points. I'm not sure that was entirely a self-inflicted loss. You've been looking at some of the relative talent at the positions for Ohio State versus what Michigan has, just in terms of recruiting rankings, and it seems like there might be a little bit of talent discrepancy there. Maybe
there is. The blueprint isn't such a quick fix in that regard. No, but I don't understand the lessons just learned this year. Was this the first year they learned the lessons, or is this a culmination of 5 years now? You're like, you know what? If we look at every year, then we start to see the facts, and now we know how to deal. Now, finally, our eyes have been opened that we need to play better against Ohio State. We need to stop beating ourselves by not being fast enough to defend guys or to tackle them, or we need to stop beating ourselves by not coaching our quarterbacks very well and letting them regress. Is that what that means, not beating themselves? Does it mean you open up the offense more and leave it open? Does that mean not giving the ball to the nose tackle?
I'm not sure giving the ball to a nose tackle was their biggest issue, but it might have been symptomatic of some of their issues last year.
But they do get Chris Evans back next year, maybe. So I'm sure now you add him with Zach Charbonnet, and quarterback at this point is irrelevant because you've drawn out the plan. Once the blueprint is put out there, nothing can go wrong, right?
Well, the quarterback I'm not sure who the quarterback's going to be. I would guess Dylan McCaffrey, but it could be Joe Milton. But whoever the quarterback is, it's someone who didn't beat out Shea Patterson last year. And Shea Patterson, just as a reminder, entered college as the number one pro-style passer in the country, spent a couple of years at Ole Miss, transferred to Michigan, spent 2 years under quarterback guru Jim Harbaugh. NFL.com, their official scouting report on Patterson is he has, quote, a chance to make end of roster or practice squad. And one scouting site that reviewed his tape, quote, he will struggle to roster in the NFL, but if placed in an ideal situation which highlights what he does best, he could challenge for a third quarterback role by year 2. That is, I got to tell you, if I was placed in an ideal situation which highlights what I do best, I also could challenge for a third quarterback role by year 2. I think I could do that. So, yeah, I just, there are systemic issues there that are not going to get better until they recruit better. And I know that there's, the reflexive, we're just too good to do the things that you have to do to recruit. But there's a whole bunch of stuff like have recruiting meetings and have an overall coherent strategy that is not involved in any violations of NCAA rules that Michigan doesn't do right now. So I'm not sure that we're simply too pure and virginal to recruit well at a high level. I'm not sure that's the only issue they have there.
No, and we could do an entire show just based on the recruiting rankings pieces that I'm working on, because just looking at basically what I did is I took the existing scholarship rosters from all 3 teams as best as I can, because we don't necessarily know everybody who is leaving yet, but each team was a little over the 85. So, you just, and then I looked at the recruiting rankings for each of those guys, where they were in terms of nationally ranked, where they were in terms of their position, and just went through and saw, how many guys were ranked in the top 100, how many guys were ranked in the top 10 of their position. And then recently I put all of the rosters together, and just to see like the top 20 ranked players in the Big Ten as recruits. And I say Big Ten of these 3 teams because I didn't do everybody. There's no point. But of the top 20 players from Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, 15 of those guys are Ohio State players. 3 are Penn State, 2 are Michigan. And almost all of these sortings and filterings and data examinations I did, it's Ohio State by far and away number 1, Penn State by a pretty good distance number 2, and then there's Michigan. And as we keep talking about, if Michigan falls behind Penn State, like that's not something that Jim Harbaugh is necessarily equipped to fix, because Penn State gets out and they recruit. James Franklin is engaging. He works hard at that. Michigan, as we have said 1,000 times, based on that Amazon Prime show, All or Nothing, there's not much engaging about that program. Like, if you didn't grow up with Michigan in your mind as something mythical or amazing, I don't know what you would see now to convince you that it is mythical or amazing.
No, and the players who are recruits now are the recruits for the class of 2021. So when they were probably born in 2003, 2004. So they literally do not remember Michigan ever winning the Big Ten in their lifetimes. So why would Michigan be this mythical anything to them? Michigan, in their memories, if they start remembering things when they were little tiny kids, they remember the Rich Rod era. I doubt anyone in the class of 2021 has any recollection of Lloyd Carr as a head coach. So, I mean, this is the old Taylor Lewan quote about, all I've known at Michigan is sadness and failure, or misery and failure, or whatever he said. I mean, maybe when they were 7, they won the Sugar Bowl against Virginia Tech under Brady Hoke one year. And then other than that, the highlights have been what? Have they gone to any other New Year's Six Bowls and won them? They got killed by Florida last year. They got killed by Alabama in 2019. Like, what is it that people would remember that would stand out to them? So you've got basically no history worth noting to people who are recruits now. Harbaugh is, say what you will about James Franklin, and Lord knows that I've said what I what I
Yeah.
will about James Franklin and his various shortcomings. He's engaging. He's interesting as a person. Like, he seems like you would talk to him, and if you didn't know any better, you'd come away going, "Oh, I'm excited to go play for this guy." Harbaugh's just weird. Like, he's real weird. Their staff is just like, there's no. I mean, this is trite, but there's like no juice on that staff. Like, there's just no energy. There's no momentum around that program. It's just kind of like, oh, and here also is Michigan. And if you can't, if you can't get an offer from Ohio State or maybe Penn State, like, hey, you could go to Michigan. It's fine. And as a backup option, if you can't go to a school that has a chance to go to the college football playoff, like, you go to the Citrus Bowl. That's okay.
I'm looking here like at what is Jim Harbaugh's crowning achievement so far? What is Michigan's crowning achievement under him? It's maybe the Citrus Bowl win over Florida 41-7 in his first year, 2015. It might be Penn State in 2016 when they destroyed Franklin 49-10. That team went on to be 11-3. That Penn State team went on to be 11-3. And then I think maybe you have to go to just this past year when they destroyed Notre Dame 45-14 in terrible weather, which wasn't even, you almost have to throw that out like the Snow Bowl, where the weather was the real factor, not either of the teams playing. There is no great crowning achievement. Now, granted, 2018, did they win a co-division title? Is that right, Tom?
Yes, they shared the division title in 2018. So that's pretty big. I just pulled up their bowl history. Since Tom Brady left, Tom Brady, who is, I think, currently collecting, I think he qualifies for a golden Buckeye card now. Since Tom Brady left Michigan, how many BCS/New Year's Six bowls has Michigan won?
I'm going to say, as I scroll through here for the answer...
Oh, don't cheat.
I was already looking. I'll say 3.
1. They have won 1 New Year's Six bowl game. They beat Virginia Tech in that Sugar Bowl in the overtime game in 2011. That was the year that just everything in the world went right for Brady Hoke, and Michigan fans talked themselves into the fact that, oh man, 10-year war 2, Brady Hoke versus Urban Meyer. Here we go. And they beat Virginia Tech, who was like a 20th or so ranked team, and it took overtime to do it. Since then, they beat Alabama in the Orange Bowl on January 1st, 2000. That was Brady's last game. Since then, won a Citrus, lost to Citrus. Won an Outback, lost to Rose, lost an Alamo, lost to Rose. Won a Capital One, lost a Gator, won that one Sugar Bowl, lost an Outback, lost a Buffalo Wild Wings, won a Citrus, lost an Orange, lost an Outback, lost a Peach, lost a Citrus. I mean, Jim Harbaugh has been there 5 full years now. He has won 1 bowl game. He has not beaten Ohio State. I mean, he is John Cooper without the charm. It's remarkable, and without the recruiting.
Yeah, and the bowl games, the last 2, 35-16 lost Alabama, and then 41-15 to Florida. The games aren't competitive. And you look at the way recruiting is going, and it's not like there's this surge going. You're like, oh, well, just wait until, this 2021 class. Wait till the 2020 class, they get here. Like, Ohio State's 2017 class, you knew they were going to be effective right away, but just wait until 2018 and 2019 when those guys are sophomores and juniors and they take off, and you saw what happened. You got, Jeff Okudah, Chase Young, J.K. Dobbins, all of these guys. There's nothing like that for Michigan, and the development isn't there either. And, I don't even know how they're going to compete with Penn State moving forward. We'll see how they compete, Tom, with Michigan State moving forward. Now that Michigan State is being active, they released they tweeted out something today that was interesting. Michigan State's football Twitter account, showing the coaches working at home, and just stuff like that is more engaging than anything Jim Harbaugh's football staff has ever done on social media. And we know Ohio State's doing stuff every single day. The only stuff I see from Michigan football is like their recruiting director mocking fans for ripping on their recruiting.
Which is great, because you want to guess how many 2021 commits they've gotten in the last 12 months?
Yeah.
Like 365 days.
2? 1?
One.
Yeah.
One, because one of them was March 19th, 2019. So, yeah, they have gotten one commit in the last 365 days. And he's a 5-star quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, number 13 overall player in the country. But that's the kind of player where normally you have a 5-star quarterback and you have people just flocking to go play with him. You look at Kyle McCord in the 2021 class for Ohio State. He's there. They have added a bunch of wide receivers. They've added linemen. And they're bringing in like really top guys. J.J. McCarthy, 5-star player. He's been committed since May 11th, 2019. That's 10 and a half months now. And they have not added another 21 commit. Like, a 5-star quarterback should be like a magnet for other recruits to want to go play for him. And it hasn't happened. And, there's nothing there about that Michigan program right now that fits, that would draw people in. Like, it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't look like it's fun. There's no momentum at all. The coach does not have, like, Ryan Day is an engaging personality. Ryan Day is fun to talk to. Jim Harbaugh is weird and awkward, and you watch his press conferences and you just it's like watching Curb Your Enthusiasm, but it's not funny. Like, you just like that real uncomfortable, like you're squirming in your seat, like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. And there's just nothing there. There's no history that these kids remember. And, Charles Woodson is great. We all remember Charles Woodson. That was before all these guys were born. And Tom Brady, like, people remember Tom Brady as a New England Patriot. None of these kids were alive when Tom Brady was at Michigan. It's like Notre Dame recruiting off of Joe Montana. Like, yeah, he played there a million years ago. It's all in standard definition. It all looks like old, 8mm film at this point. And it just, there's no draw there right now for that program to sell.
No, and it's not even stuck in neutral. It's stuck in park. Like, the engine is off. There's no nothing. The battery is dead. It's in a position I never really expected to see, because growing up for so long, like, Michigan was a national brand, and it still is, but not nearly to. It's like Miami is a national brand for some reason. I don't know if it's just part of some people's DNA, because it's not like they've seen these programs have success. I don't know if it's the colors. I don't know why. Bad parenting, I think, is always an excuse for stuff like this, where, you force your child to like something, like if you were to force your son to be a Mets fan. Mm-hmm. Tom?
Who would do that? Couldn't be me, friends. Couldn't be me.
But I don't know how Jim Harbaugh gets out of it. I don't know how his staff gets out of it. They've tried to do the speed and space, and that will help. But I guess it will take results. And right now, it would take upsets. And Tom, we know the one thing that Jim Harbaugh has not been good at, it's upsets at Michigan.
No. Michigan's biggest problem is they don't have the talent to match up with Ohio State. And because they're Michigan, Ohio State is never going to overlook them. That game is, they have the walls in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. They have the countdown clocks. That is the number one thing that is drilled into people's heads from the times their time they're getting recruited to Ohio State is this is what matters. You have to beat that team. So you're not going to have the sleepwalk into Iowa City, sleepwalk into West Lafayette, and, just get shocked and don't don't show up and lose. You're never going to have that with Michigan. Ohio State's never going to overlook them. So therefore, if Ohio State comes out full blast, Ohio State has much better players than Michigan does. Ohio State, I mean, this is a little bit more subjective, but it sure seems like Ohio State has better coaches than Michigan does right now too. So I don't know what it is that happens. I mean, Michigan at this point has to just sort of be relying on, well, at some point Ohio State comes into Ann Arbor and they just have one of those days where the ball bounces wrong and you have a couple tipped passes that get run back for pick sixes, or you lose a bunch of fumbles, and that's what it takes. Like what Ohio State lost to Penn State in 2016. Ohio State had a better team than Penn State, but it was just one of those days where you had a punt block, you had a field goal block, you have all this stuff that goes against you, and you just barely lose. That's what Michigan needs. Last year, was it the first carry of the game? J.K. Dobbins fumbled it. It was like, this could be one of those. And it hit the ground and bounced right back up to it. It was like, nope, okay. Nope, it's not. Nope, that's not going to be that day. So, well, we'll see you again in 2 years up here and maybe then. Because, I mean, you just wrote something on the point spread for this year's game is what, Ohio State minus 6.5, 7.5, something like that?
7.5, yeah.
7.5. I mean, Michigan playing in Columbus, getting just over a touchdown. Like, what kind of what kind of odds would I have to give you? Like, I'll give you 4-1 on this bet or something. Would you have to take to take Michigan getting 7.5 points in Columbus this November?
Oh yeah, there would have to be more than just getting back what I bet on that one. It's probably a good thing that these initial lines are only taking small bets, because right now 7.5 feels like free money based on just the last handful of games. But Tom, like, say Michigan didn't beat themselves last year. Is it like, instead of 56-27, is it 56-30, 56-31?
How did Michigan beat themselves? I mean, they didn't have a ton of turnovers. They had some drop passes in the second half, but that doesn't change the fact that Ohio State, I just wrote about this a week or two ago, so the numbers are not exact, but I think it's Ohio State has scored 15 touchdowns against Michigan in the last 2 years, and Michigan has forced 7 punts from Ohio State. The numbers are something along those lines. It's like basically a 2-to-1 ratio of scoring touchdowns to punting the ball away for Ohio State the last 2 seasons against Michigan. Like, if Michigan's going to give up 56 points and 63 points or 62 points a game, like, I can look up how many times Michigan has scored more than 56 points a game in the last few years. Not a lot. So, how often are they going to be able to outscore Ohio State if they can't stop Ohio State? Like, I don't think that's an issue. I don't think that's the, I don't think Michigan, giving away a couple possessions on offense is going to be enough to make up the difference to be in enough of a way to win.
No, I'm with you, Tom. Let's move on to Buckeye fans' love of spelling, and particularly spelling Ohio, as we close up Smarch Madness, our bracket of all things Ohio State, which crowned a winner this past weekend. Came down to a Final Four of the Outer End versus number 1 seed Outer End, which we both expected to go far, versus number 6 OHIO on the road. And I remember during our selection show saying, I think we both agreed, OHIO on the road was a sneaky pick because at its best, it can beat anybody. And at its best, it beat the Outer End and made it to the finals against Script Ohio, the 1 seed in their bracket, who defeated Gold Pants, which kind of goes into what we were saying with the whole Michigan thing. It's almost like people don't appreciate the Gold Pants as much as they used to because there's so many of them around. Like, you can't, even now, under quarantine, you can't go 20 feet without seeing a pair of gold pants. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think my main takeaway from this is that Ohio State fans in some order, like Ohio State football, some of the accoutrement around Ohio State game day, such as Script Ohio, like beating Michigan as represented in Gold Pants, and like taunting Michigan as represented in the OHIO on the road. And, frankly, and like drinking, and that obviously that outer end being represented there. I feel like we've learned a lot about the Ohio State, cultural zeitgeist, if you will, the culture around the program, the fans. I feel like we've learned a lot about, who these people are and the types of things that they learn that we didn't know before we started this whole process.
Yeah, and I'm looking at OHIO on the road, their road to the finals, and they beat a restaurant, Nancy's Home Cooking. Then they beat a tradition in the Mirror Lake Jump. Then they beat porch drinking. So they're like, we're better than a restaurant. People like them better than a restaurant. They like them better than a tradition. They like them better than drinking. And then they like them better than the varsity club. And then the outer end. So it's like drinking is so far behind OHIO on the road because I guess, how the late great Kenny Rogers sang there's time enough for counting when the dealing's done. It's like there's time enough for drinking once the spelling is done, I guess. Once the taunting is done, then we can go and then we can have some drinks. And yet OHIO on the road lost decisively to Script Ohio. 69.7% of the people voted for Script Ohio over OHIO on the road, which received just 30.3%. Tom, were you surprised by that outcome?
I was a little bit surprised at how bad. I mean, that's a nice margin in the final, but Script Ohio, going through the tournament, it was just blowout after blowout after blowout. Beat Skull Session 94-6 in the round of 32. Beat Block O 95-5 in the Sweet 16. Beat Fall Sweatshirt Weather, which I thought was a legitimate chance to maybe make a run. Beat it 88-12 in the Elite Eight. And beat Gold Pants 74-26. Like Script Ohio it was like this year's LSU team with which I don't know who the maybe OHIO on the road benefited from some bad officiating calls that knocked out outer end that maybe made Script Ohio's championship game a little easier than it might otherwise have been. But it was. This was a shockingly dominating run. We made Script Ohio the number 1 overall seed. I think that was, we probably came in thinking that is a very fair representative spot for it to be. I did not expect it to be the single most dominating run I anywhere on the bracket by a wide margin.
Nope. I did not. Would I have been surprised if they won? No, of course not. But they just destroyed everybody, and we'll see if they do it again next year.
I sure hope we don't have to do Smarch Madness again next year.
No.
Something will have gone terribly wrong if we have to do Smarch Madness again next year.
Plus, I think we should also, if it looks like that's going to happen, I'd say we should research the bars, but of course we wouldn't be able to.
No.
So there is that. So that was Smarch Madness. We want to thank everybody for participating and following along and taking part in that. We appreciated it. Now we have the next thing that we have planned for everybody, Tom. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we this past week, my kids have been home, and there have been a whole bunch of like art teachers and authors who have been doing these like Facebook Lives where they've, the author of the Pete the Cat series of kids books has done like a read along and then like here's how we draw Pete, and let your kid watches and can learn how to draw Pete the Cat and that kind of stuff. We thought, hey, grown-ups want to have fun too. Grown-ups are probably looking for some sort of sign of life that there are things going on outside of their house and grown-up human interaction. So Thursday this week, so that'll be Thursday the 26th of March, I think we're going to aim for 9:30 or so, 8:30. I don't remember what time we said.
We didn't say a time. Whatever time you say, Tom.
Okay. 8:45 p.m. on Thursday. We'll tweet it out. Don't worry. We'll have a post on the front page of the Ozone. that I'll tell you when. Thursday evening, we're going to, we found a platform that will let us stream the 2016 Ohio State-Michigan game, and it'll sync it up for everyone so we can all watch it. Gerd and I have tested this already. It seems to work just fine. So we're all going to get together online, and we're going to watch the 2016 Ohio State-Michigan game. There's a chat feature in there. We will be commenting on the game. You can ask us questions. We'll be happy to answer questions in there. Just trying to come up with a different way to, have a little interaction with other grown-ups and watch a little college football in a time when there's some uncertainty about when we're going to get to start watching sports together again. So this seemed like a good, fun way to do that. And if this works and we're all happy with it and you guys enjoy it, there turns out there's a whole bunch of other good games that Ohio State fans will probably like to watch. And you pointed out an old a YouTube channel that has some just incredible old college football games. Like, you want to watch some like 1984 BYU? Like, yup, let's do that. I am all for it. I am 100% on board with doing this every night for the foreseeable future, because there's some good stuff on there. I really want one of our next ones to be the 1993 Ohio State-Washington game. That was one of the first ones I remember watching when I first started really paying attention to Ohio State football. So that one will be a fun one for me. But yeah, we'll I think that's going to be fun. Hopefully this platform works as well with a whole bunch of people on it as it did with two. But it should be fun, and hopefully give you a fun something fun to think about on Thursday night. And hey, liquor stores are still considered a necessary resource for the state of Ohio. So if you want to go get yourself a 6-pack of beer, if you don't have one at home, you could do that and watch a little football with us, and it'll be just like the old times. Yeah,
and we're talking the 40-minute version, no commercials. As we were testing this out, it moves.
Yeah, I don't want to spend 3 hours with Gerd. You don't want to spend 3 hours with Gerd. So no, we're doing the 40-minute versions. We'll you can just tell your wife, give me an hour, and or your husband. No judgment. We're not being sexist here. But yeah, spend 40 minutes or so with us. We'll chat. We'll answer some questions, and then if it goes well, we'll take a poll on which game we want to do next, and maybe do this weekly or something like that as we trudge through the sportless tundra of 2020.
Was that 93 game? Was that Big Daddy against DeMarco Farr?
Yes.
Where they were both dominating, but Big Daddy was just better.
Yeah. That was. I think it ended up 21-12, and one of the first night games at Ohio State. They did one in 90 or 86 against Pitt. That might have been the second night game in Ohio State history, if I remember right. And that was Washington coming off of like the incredible end of the Don James, the peak of the Don James era when they won. I think they won the 91 national championship. They might have won the 92 national championship. So this is 93. This is, a top team coming into Columbus, and Ohio State whipped their butts. And yeah, that was the game where I think John Cooper went, we redshirted Big Daddy Wilkinson. I don't think we're going to have him for 2 more years after this one.
No, I think he knew by about the third quarter, like, well, that's the last we're going to have him in. This year's going to be the last of it. But there were more, don't worry, we'll replace him next year with Luke Fickell. And then, Luke Fickell was there for 4 years.
Yeah, and at least you have a guy who's going to be the number 1 overall draft pick in the NFL the following year. So at least you're going to beat Michigan that year. So I mean that's fine.
All right, Tom. Let's end this show. I want to thank you all for listening. We do appreciate it. We hope you guys are doing okay out there. Stay hunkered down. Social distancing, at least 6 feet. Tom, I stopped at the BP 2 days ago to get a case of beer, and I was being socially distant. Somebody tried to cut in front of me because I was in the checkout line, like six to 26 feet behind the person paying. Somebody tried to cut in front of me. Then they saw me standing in line, and then they got like right behind me, like not even a foot away. It's like, come on, dude, socially distant. Let's do this. Let's do this for America. Let's do this for Ohio. Let's do this for me. That was 3 days ago. Two days ago. I'm not showing any symptoms yet. So that's good. I still have some beers left, so that is better. And just give people room. That's all. Give people room, right, Tom? Room.
Yeah, exactly. We need to get you those big inflatable suits they use for the competition during the timeouts at Ohio State games, where the people are running in these like enormous bubbles, and then like Brutus will just clothesline someone. Yeah, we need to get you one of those for the next time you need to make a beer run.
Yes, and then find a gas station with the sliding doors that open wide enough to get me in there.
The real challenge is, which happens first? If you're exposed, which happens first? Do you start showing symptoms, or have you finished the case of beer first? That's the real race here.
Yeah, once you start showing symptoms, you better pound that beer and just because things weren't going to taste good for a while. But we want to thank you all for listening. We do appreciate it. We will. We're going to go. We've got a Patreon only bonus show coming up this week as well. Probably try to get back into the quote unquote studios once again this week to do some other stuff, do another show if we can, and just try to give you guys something. And as long as there's stuff happening, and even when there isn't, Tom, we still got to do this, so, right?
Well, yeah, all people are doing right now is going out and taking a walk or taking a run or riding a bike. And I have found that I'm going through podcasts much faster than I do normally, since I am out walking or running or biking or whatever, much more than I typically do. So, yeah, I'm right there with you. If you are going, hey, why don't these jerks do more podcasts? I'm right there with you. So we will try and give you enough content to get you through your walks, your runs, and all of that this week.
Have you stopped listening on 1.5 speed? Maybe would that help?
That would help, but I have found that if I listen to like the Mets podcast that I listen to, if I listen on regular speed, it is painfully slow. The music is like, oh, why does this music sound like it's? It's like it's awful. And yeah, once you go to 1.5 speed, it's very, very difficult to go back. So yeah, I just have to find more podcasts, or we have to do more podcasts, and then I can listen to us talk. There you go.
And I'll credit you, Tom, as we sign off. You called this, you said it'd be a 75-minute show. So good for you.
I said, well, we could do this we can aim for like 45 minutes or so. I'm sure we'll go an hour 15. And looking at my recorder, like, yeah, we're right about on the nose.
All right, nice going. We will talk to you guys hopefully later this week. Take care of yourselves.